Hey, good Sunday, everybody. Welcome back. Got a big time update here for you on what unfortunately really looks like could be a worst case scenario for the Tampa Bay area, or really just someone here along the west coast of Florida, as currently Tropical Storm Milton continues to intensify and potentially rapidly intensify over the next 48 hours. Before a potential strike to the Florida West Coast here by the middle of this coming weekend. Honestly, it's obviously not fun, but we just dealt with Helene, so a lot of people are already on edge. Now we have another storm that unfortunately, once again, looks like it could, quite honestly, really be a worst case scenario. Tampa Bay is an area that, I'm going to just kind of go on a spiel here at the beginning, is an area that has been relatively spared many times in a row here from the tropics, but unfortunately, its luck is going to run out eventually, and Milton could be the one to do it with a strike really at a worst possible angle and at potentially major hurricane status. So that'll really be the big time focus on today's video. Other than that, we will talk about other ongoing weather. We do have a nice fall cold front crossing through portions of the country, so we will touch on that towards the end of the video. But really, most of this video is going to be focused on that tropical system. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, please do so. This is a great way to stay informed as we continue to monitoring this developing situation. And also hit that bell for the latest notifications. That'll tell you every time I upload with more model guidance and a breakdown of that guidance. It's really just a great way to stay informed with the latest data. Also comment, let me know where you're watching from, especially if you're in the Florida area. Let me know what you're doing to prepare. If you're watching outside of Florida, let me know what you're seeing out there in your neck of the woods. And consider sharing the video with somebody here, again, down into the Florida Peninsula, as again, a big time storm could be on their way. Alrighty, with that said, let's go ahead and dive into things because, again, a lot to get to today, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. Now, current satellite imagery, we do still have Hurricane Kirk spinning out here over portions of the North Atlantic. Luckily, Kirk is really on his way out of here and at a pretty quick clip too here, moving very quickly. Now, south of there, we do have Hurricane Leslie in the main development region of the Atlantic, another hurricane. Luckily for us, Leslie also going to be kind of following the exact same path as Kirk, and will be well out of our hair here by a week or so from now. Now, the other obvious area that we're going to talk about is Tropical Storm Milton, and it's kind of hard to believe, but it's this tiny little blob you see in the Gulf of Mexico, and we'll talk about why the size of this storm is important as well. Don't let it being a small storm, let you or make you let your guard down, because small storms, unfortunately, can pack even a bigger punch sometimes than large storms, and we'll discuss that. But another thing I want you to know is well in front of the storm, look at all of this rain over the state of Florida. Another precursor event here, just like Helene was for the mountains of North Carolina, where we had all that rain well before the storm ever got there. We're seeing the same thing over the state of Florida here with what is Milton, and then again all of this prefrontal mess well out ahead of it, as we have a lot of divergence aloft. Now, luckily, the state of Florida can handle the rain a lot better than a place like the mountains of North Carolina, so that is the good news, but still, flooding rains are going to be a concern. All right, latest from the National Hurricane Center, Kirk, 105 mile an hour, Category 2 storm. Again, not a problem though, so we'll go ahead and mark it off the list. Leslie, an 85 mile an hour, Category 1 storm. Again, though, not a problem. Let's mark it off the list. We do have an area to watch here in the main development region of the Atlantic, about a 30% chance of development. But luckily, that, again, too, does not look like a very big-time threat here, especially in the near term, but really probably ever. So that's not really a concern. Now, we will talk on these a little bit more, but again, I just want you to kind of keep those, off on the side here. Now, here we go. Tropical Storm Milton, a 60 mile an hour tropical storm. That's the latest update that just came out. This one is a big deal. This is the one we need to watch. So again, don't focus on the other three as much. Milton is really the big time story that I want us to discuss in today's video. Now, I will very briefly, again, just finish up with these three out here. I know I said don't worry about them, and again, don't, but just so I can, give you the information and tell you why not to worry about them, I will show that to you. So, latest cones for these two. Kirk, again, well on out of here. One thing interesting about Kirk is the cone actually includes Paris, Amsterdam, Hanover, and not far from Hamburg or Berlin. So, kind of rare to see a cone that far into Europe, but we're seeing that with Kirk. So that is something interesting. Leslie, again, going to take a path like Kirk and is on its way to weakening. So again, good news with both of those storm systems. Now, timing it out for you here, let me back this up to kind of basically right now. Again, here is Kirk at the top of your screen, this big kind of blob of mess that you're seeing on radar there, or I guess depicted radar, or whatever you want to call it. And then we have, again, Leslie down here. So again, I'm going to just quickly move this ahead into time. Kirk just out of the screen, not a problem. Leslie dying off and kind of just getting killed out here in the central Atlantic by the time we get about a week or so out from now. So again, other than that, nothing showing up on the GFS model, and you can even see that on our ensembles here. Really a pretty quiet stretch ahead, and even that area that they're watching off the coast only has a couple members currently developing it here on the European and its ensemble members. So again, good news there into the main development region of the Atlantic. Not a super big deal by any means. All right. Now let's go ahead and focus fully on what is Tropical Storm Milton. And again, this is the one that is a big deal. This is the one I need you to pay attention to. And if you are in the state of Florida, specifically the Tampa Bay area, the Fort Myers area, Port Charlotte, even up through the southern half of the Big Bend, even back down to the Keys, I need you to watch this one like a hawk because, again, this could potentially be the big one for somebody. And, just 2 years ago, we had Ian. That was the big one for Fort Myers. We've had Adalia and Helene. Those were the big ones for the Big Bend. The Tampa Bay area and kind of in between those has been relatively spared, not only the past couple of years, but for quite some time now. And just due to the topography of Tampa Bay, with a track like this, if it takes the track that is currently expected to a T, we're going to see big time problems in Tampa Bay. Potentially, not even potentially, I'll just tell you, probably the worst tropical system we've seen in the Tampa Bay area, in at least the modern record here. All right, so again, in Milton currently, this is a tiny storm, folks. I mean, look at how small this thing is. In fact, all this prefrontal mess is bigger than the storm itself, which you might be thinking is a good thing, and it is to an extent. That means less people will feel the harsh impacts of the storm, but unfortunately, that means the epicenter of the storm is likely going to be, a lot worse than it probably would be if this was a large storm. Also, what this does is it prevents wind shear and dry air from killing the storm off super easily. These little compact systems really are, tough to penetrate with dry air, and that's going to be something that we kind of really need to happen with this one to weaken it upon landfall. But again, it's going to be tough to get that to happen. But either way, again, small storm, you are seeing all of this convection firing around it. Hurricane hunters have been in there. They are finding pressure down in the low 990s, upper 980s. So, a healthy tropical storm for sure. Even if the wind field hasn't quite caught up yet, we will expect to see an increase in wind speeds here over the next little bit. But again, just definitely a strengthening system and well on its way to what the National Hurricane Center is expecting to be a major hurricane. Latest cone from the National Hurricane Center, expecting by even just this afternoon to be an even stronger tropical storm, and then overnight tonight into tomorrow reaching Category 1 hurricane status. And by the time we get to tomorrow afternoon, a strong Category 1. And then we get to Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday, expecting a major hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico here, moving towards the state of Florida. And we'll go ahead and zoom this in. And again, I mean, folks, the center of this line is quite literally right over the city of Tampa, right over St. Petersburg through Pinellas Park, Clearwater. I mean, you really could not get a more right over the city path. And again, for anyone who's not familiar, really a worst case scenario for Tampa Bay is this exact path. Anything that is basically over or just to the north of Tampa Bay, this is going to bring big time storm surge right into the bay. And I mean, we'll see, we will easily break records for storm surge in the Tampa area if this is the track the storm takes. Now, the good news is, or maybe not good news, but the good news for Tampa Bay per se, is there is a chance this shifts south some. Again, if this were to go further south here, then the storm surge wouldn't be nearly as bad in Tampa. We would obviously still have impacts. And again, I think the northern side of the storm will be the messier side of the storm anyway. But storm surge wise, again, that would be better for the Tampa Bay area. And then, but unfortunately, that would then bring the surge somewhere further south. So a very highly populated area here. The past couple of storms have been into the Big Bend, which, I met with some folks in the Big Bend when I was chasing there, some great folks, nice folks, but it's a rural area. So that is kind of one saving grace. This storm, again, look at how much of this cone is right into some of the most populated areas of the state of Florida. So really, from an emergency management standpoint, this is a near worst case scenario. And again, it's not often we get a track like this just due west out of the out of the Gulf of Mexico. Oftentimes they're coming from the Atlantic, or sometimes they come out of the Caribbean and then curve up like this. But this one, definitely a unique track, and going to be one that probably gets remembered for a while. Now, the good news is the storm will weaken and move out to sea after Florida. And I've had a couple comments, or really I think it's one person that has commented saying, oh, it's not good news that it's just hitting Florida. And I'm not implying to anybody that this is good that this is hitting Florida. What I am saying is this is good that this isn't hitting Florida and then moving inland to Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Tennessee, and all these other states. Obviously, you folks in Florida, we don't want this to happen to you, and we're praying for you, and we want you to take this information. But again, we will take any kind of silver lining we can, and that silver lining is that luckily this isn't going to hit the mountains of North Carolina. It's not going to hit upstate South Carolina. Again, and we're not going to see big time inland impacts outside of the state of Florida. So, all right, let's take a look at some model guidance here, and then we'll break down these impacts a little bit more and continue onward from there. So latest GFS, and again, what I want you to notice is look at all of this prefrontal rain already happening over the state of Florida. Flooding is a big time concern on top of storm surge and wind concern with this storm. And look at kind of what's happening. So we talked about this a little bit ago, I mean a couple of days ago if you're a returning viewer. We've had so much vorticity in the Gulf of Mexico that has kind of been, flaring up a little bit. And that's what this is. We're seeing little enhanced areas of spin along this big trough. That is really increasing some areas of rainfall over the Sunshine State well ahead of the storm system. Now, here comes the storm again. It's small. It's at the bottom of your screen, but here we go. This is into Tuesday afternoon. The storm strengthening into a major hurricane. And again, look at all this prefrontal rain that has passed the state. A lot of rain now and to the time the storm gets here. But here comes Milton himself as a major hurricane on the latest GFS, and then pulls north, continues to stay strong, stays steady at about 950, 960 millibars. Again, that'd probably be a Category 3 storm, much like the NHC is predicting, and then landfall right into Tampa Bay as a major hurricane. And again, would bring really devastating surge to that area, plenty of wind damage. And then obviously a flooding threat as well with all of that precursor rain and the rain from the event itself. The one bit of good news, this is Wednesday afternoon landfall about 2 p.m. By the time we get to 8 p.m., this is already crossing back over the East Coast and moving out to sea. And then Thursday would be a pretty beautiful day across the state. So not a stalling system, but again, still seeing that precursor event. So flooding will be a problem even if it's not a slow moving storm, as you can see there on the GFS. Now, the European model, basically a similar story, really the same thing here. A lot of prefrontal rain. Again, notice these areas of enhanced spin along this frontal boundary. This is really going to uptick the rain between now through Monday through Tuesday and then up to Wednesday as the storm approaches. And the European, again, a strengthening storm, a strong hurricane, and then about 980, 970-ish millibars here on the European. But I will add the European is known for being more conservative in the millibar category. The GFS has done a lot better on strength this year, so I think that 950, 960 range is going to be more realistic than the European's 980. But again, the track is what's important, and the track basically right through Tampa Bay, maybe a couple miles south of the bay through some of those southern suburbs, but still would be a devastating track here across the west coast of Florida. And then again, gets out of here by Thursday afternoon. So the good news here is we are seeing a lot of consistency in the models on the forecast. I'll show you some hurricane models as well. This is the HWRF. Really bombs this thing out here pretty soon. And by the time we get to Tuesday morning, we've got a Category 4 storm just north of the Yucatan Peninsula eyeing the state of Florida. And again, I'll note it again, this shows total precipitable water. And obviously you're going to see a lot around the hurricane, but again, notice all of this divergence here in front of the system and all of this troughing that we're seeing. We have high PWAT values over the southern half of Florida from the I-4, we'll even say the I-10 corridor south, but especially the I-4 corridor south here. Through the entire state of Florida, well ahead of this event. Again, I'll back this up. Look at these more kind of moist colors on your map, these more green and bluish colors. It's already starting over Florida today for Sunday. It stays there. The storm strengthens, moves towards the state, and then eventually, gets close by Wednesday afternoon. This model, the HWRF, is slower than the other models. The European and the GFS had Wednesday afternoon landfalls. The HWRF doesn't get this there until Thursday morning. So a good 12, 15-hour difference between the models. But overall, same story. Major hurricane landfall right into Tampa Bay. And again, I keep saying it, but this is really a worst case case scenario forecast for that region. And really, we're gonna have to hope that the storm either A, weakens pretty significantly up to landfall, or B, takes a track that is just different enough that we don't get that worst storm surge right into the bay. And obviously, we don't want to wish the storm upon anybody else, but in terms of population density and all, really just not a good look. All right, HMON model. I'm going to back this up a little bit. Again, let me go. You know, we haven't really looked at the beginning of the storm. So today, again, tropical storm. Tonight, strengthening likely into a hurricane by Monday. Hurricane. This model has major hurricane by tomorrow. That's not out of the cards, folks. I mean, we could see tropical storm to major hurricane in a 24-hour time span. It is possible with this system. It has very favorable conditions currently. And then again, moving just north of the Yucatan Peninsula as a major hurricane, and then towards the state of Florida. And again, I'm going to move this ahead a little bit. Here we go. This is overnight Wednesday into Thursday. So again, a little bit slower than our global models, the hurricane models are. But this is Tampa Bay right here. This down here is Port Charlotte, the Fort Myers area. And then here is what would be major Hurricane Milton moving in. And again, I mean, luckily, not really. Unfortunately, this model pulls a little bit north of the city by Thursday morning. And I will also add weekends up to landfall by a good bit. I mean, this thing goes from, 940 millibars to, 970 upon landfall, which is, a significant decrease in pressure. And I'll talk about why that is next. But even then, with a track like this, you're in Tampa Bay thinking, well, I mean, look at this. There's hardly any rain over us. Yeah, and again, I do think the northern side of the storm will be the messier side, but all of this strong wind is going to be getting pushed onshore here, and again, storm surge will become a big concern with a setup like this, and then the storm crosses the state, and then again, dies here over the Atlantic Ocean. So what about intensity? Again, all these models are showing big-time intensity. Why is that, and why is there maybe a caveat with that? Well, again, I do think the storm will strengthen big time here over the next day or two, and here's why. Very warm waters over the Gulf of Mexico. That has not changed at all, and very moist pocket of air for the next 24, 48 hours. Now, after that, upon final approach to landfall here's the GFS. You'll notice here's our storm system, obviously, but look at what's to the north. That nice fall cold front I was talking about. Yeah, it's bringing dry air. It's bringing low dew points, and look at that trying to wrap into the storm here. This, I think, is going to be something that could really save us. I'm not saying it's going to, but this could be a big factor if this storm turns out to not be nearly what it could be. It'll likely be because this dry air is able to penetrate the southern side of the storm, get into that center of circulation, and weaken it quickly. And some of the hurricane models, like the HMON I just showed you, do that pretty well. Now, the GFS struggles to do that nearly as much, and again, weakens this maybe 5 or 10 millibars up to landfall. So not nearly enough to, prevent, problems, obviously. This would still be a major hurricane, still have big problems. But you do know at the last second that dry air sneaks in and then luckily kills the storm pretty quickly in the Atlantic. And doesn't allow it to re-strengthen once it gets off the coast of Florida. So again, now a couple things about this. One, this is a small storm, and I mentioned this at the beginning. Small storms are notoriously better at one, rapid intensification, and two, keeping that core of the storm closed off from the outside environment, really being a closed system and preventing dry air, preventing wind shear from getting in nearly as easily as a large storm system, which I guess, think of it as a giant castle. If you have a big castle with a bunch of entrances, it's more likely somebody's going to get in. If you have a tiny little home with a bunch of security, it's going to be more difficult to get in because there's just less entry points. So it's similar with hurricanes here in that sense. And again, it's just more difficult to weaken these small compact storms. So there is a lot of dry air in place. Will that be able to help us? It could help us, I think. Is it going to limit impacts and prevent potentially disastrous outcome for some places? I don't think so. Okay. Wind shear. What about wind shear? Well, again, right now, very favorable wind shear environment, and that continues through the next couple of days. Plenty of divergence and even stronger divergence to the north of this storm. So kind of two problems with this. One, that's, again, creating more convergence at the surface, more lift, lower pressure. But also, much like Helene did, this is diverging that air out towards the state of Florida. And that's one of the reasons we're getting all of this prefrontal rain is just all of this moisture getting shoved that way. Now, I will mention up to landfall, the models unfortunately have become even more conducive, honestly, in the wind shear department, but there is a chance you'll notice all of this very high wind shear to the north. If the storm tracks a little bit further north, maybe that helps us out and shears the storm a little bit. But again, with a situation like this, unfortunately, this is really only going to help the storm. I mean, this is a ton of divergence on the northern side. And we do have some winds going over the storm, but unfortunately, the storm is moving so quickly that the difference in this upper level winds compared to the forward motion isn't really going to be enough to, rip the storm apart, but it will make the storm slightly lopsided between this wind shear and the dry air. I think the worst of the weather will be on kind of the northern and the eastern side of the storm. So, if you're on the south side, especially if you're on that southwesterly side of the storm, again, not as nearly bad of impacts, I don't think, besides storm surge, which again, anywhere on the southern side of the storm will be a concern just due to the orientation of it and the way that's coming inland. So again, overall though, I mean, just a very conducive environment for strengthening with this storm system. Now, track, again, basically, I'm not showing you the upper level patterns because it's a pretty straightforward track, but anywhere from the southern Big Bend down to Fort Myers. That's where we're thinking right now. And unfortunately, right in the middle of that is the city of Tampa. But again, this could shift north a little bit more towards the Big Bend. This could shift south a little bit more towards Fort Myers. Both of those are very real possibilities with this storm system. But all things considered, very confident a major hurricane will move through the west coast of Florida here Wednesday or Thursday of this coming week. And intensity-wise, this is a little bit tougher, I would say. The track we feel confident about. Intensity, it could go a couple of ways here, but you'll notice a big cluster in that category 2 to 4 strength range. I think that's probably a safe bet. Category 5 cannot be ruled out, but I think it's unlikely. I personally think probably category 3 with this storm at landfall. Before landfall, we could have a category 4 storm at some point, maybe even kissing category 5. But I think at landfall, probably a category 3 system. I hope that dry air can get in there. But again, there is an upper end scenario where this is a category 4, borderline category 5 storm at landfall. There's also a lower end scenario where maybe that shear and dry air do a lot more for us, and this is more of a category 2 to 1 storm. But either way, big time impacts. Again, I think I can't really hit that point home enough. No matter what, we are going to see big time impacts for a couple of reasons, and here's one of them. Total rainfall through the next 5 days with this storm system. I mean, places just offshore of the coast here, we're talking 20 to 30 inches of rain. Places inland, a foot of rain in places. Again, would not be surprised to see that. A lot of rain over the Florida Peninsula through now through the end of the storm system due to that precursor event, plus all of the rain from the storm itself. So yeah, again, Florida is a little bit better at handling this rainfall. Again, it's already a swampy state, so everything's kind of low-lying anyway. It's not like we're going to see big landslides like we did in the mountains or these giant debris flows or anything. But there will still be flooding, and that is something we're going to need to watch here through the Sunshine State. Through the Sunshine State. Sorry, a lot of S's in that one. Here into the next week or so. So again, flooding, a big time concern there. And just to show it to you again, we do have a moderate risk of flash flooding. Maybe I can zoom this out one so you can, we'll zoom back in, it's fine. Moderate risk of flash flooding from Tampa Bay up through Orlando, Gainesville, Ocala, that area, again, through the I-4 corridor there, going to potentially see excessive rainfall that will lead to flash flooding. But really anywhere in the peninsula of Florida is going to have a shot of flash flooding due to this storm system. As for storm surge, I'm going to wait another day or two to talk about that because we're still far enough away. Again, it's only Sunday. The storm's not going to hit until likely Wednesday or Thursday. So again, not that that's a long time away, but I'm going to wait another day before we start talking about wind speed totals and or max wind speeds, I should say, and storm surge totals. So again, though, it could potentially be big time through the Florida West Coast, specifically, again, watching you folks in Tampa. And I said it before, I'll say it again. If you have family in Tampa that are not the weather aware type, and nothing against them, again, I know plenty of people that do not keep an eye to the weather all the time, but if they're maybe having a busy week and they're not thinking about the weather, give them a call, tell them, keep an eye, even if it's their local trusted meteorologist. It doesn't have to be me. Just make sure that they are keeping an eye on that forecast because, again, big time concern for that area. All right, so what's going on outside of there? Well, we do have this fall cold front that is working through, big time low pressure swinging over the northern Great Lakes here, and here is our front, again, slowly but surely working its way south and east. Outside of that, we do still have this kind of stalled out frontal boundary, and that has led to a lot of cloud cover and showers here over portions of Florida, as we talked about. Other than that, things are relatively quiet here for most of us, and you can even see that on radar. Again, outside of these two systems, the country's pretty dry. Now, zooming in to the south, first off here, again, Florida, what a mess. It's raining a lot. We've already got those flood watches in effect for much of the state here, but even some of that rain getting far enough north into South Georgia, Alabama, even back through portions of southern Louisiana and Mississippi. So again, just kind of a rainy pattern in that area. Now you get north of there into the Mid-Atlantic and into the Tennessee and Ohio River Valley, much drier, much nicer. But here's that next line of showers and storms to the north as that front moves through. Seeing some pretty good showers here moving through portions of Quebec and Ontario this Sunday, and that will continue. In fact, this could lead to potentially a severe storm threat today through portions of Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York, and we'll talk about that here in just a moment. But again, those are kind of the big features on the playing field right now, and that is what will be driving our weather. Now, as I mentioned today, again, a slight risk of severe weather up from Buffalo down to Pittsburgh and down through those communities into eastern Ohio. But that marginal risk extends even further south than there. Main reason today is going to be strong straight line winds. And some large hail tornado threat is there. It is small, though. So a 2% threat of a tornado within a 25-mile radius. So again, kind of all hazards on the table here. Need to watch them and need to have a way to get those watches and warnings. Again, it's not just the tropics that we're watching, unfortunately. Really just an active day across the board. All right, let's time this out for you. Here we go this afternoon for our Sunday. Florida, again, it's going to continue to rain. Severe threat to the north. Here we go this evening. Probably between the 4 and 8 p.m. hour, these storms fire up and begin to move on through that slight and marginal risk. Pretty linear setup in nature, so not very supercellular, maybe an embedded supercell in that line. But overall speaking, a pretty linear storm mode, and then that'll swing on through and kind of die out throughout the evening, and we'll just be left with some showers through the New England area by tomorrow morning here. Pretty rainy commute for our Monday, probably through Boston, up through Bangor, Maine, through New Hampshire, back down through Bridgeport into Providence, and even into Long Island, seeing some rain tomorrow as that low pressure swings on through, and probably a pretty showery, cloudy afternoon as well. But clearing likely overnight Tuesday. And I'll even mention here, this is Monday afternoon. There could be just enough lift on the south side that some storms get going down into the PD, through the Grand Strand, into Wilmington, Jacksonville, North Carolina, into Greenville, North Carolina. And by the way, how about those Charlotte 49ers yesterday, Greenville? A bit of a wake-up call for you folks who came and made the trip to Charlotte. So go Niners. I'll just throw that in there for anybody who cares about college sports. But again, front swings on through, and we have a pretty nice middle of the week. Maybe a little bit of lake effect precipitation gets going here by Tuesday, just as some of that cold air rushes behind that front over some of these lakes. Not expecting any snow out of that, but could see some lake effect showers here during the middle of the week. All right, so here we go. This is this afternoon. Not hard to spot that front. Look at these dew point values. I mean, we go dew point values from 60 to 30 within 50 miles. So it's gonna be a pretty sharp front here. And look at that squeezing on through here. This is Monday afternoon. Those dew points pushing southward, and by Tuesday afternoon, again, most of us are feeling it. A couple stragglers in the southeast dealing onto those higher dew points, but by Wednesday, again, dew points getting back down into the 50s and 40s for most of us, and stays nice, even getting kind of a second rush of dry air by this weekend. This is Friday. We got dew points in the 40s and 30s potentially down into the Carolinas. And again, just overall beautiful fall weather for the middle and second half of this week. You'll notice some of these dew points climb up a little bit higher through the Mississippi River Valley by the weekend, but not anything unbearable by climbing. I mean, maybe up into the 50s for some of us. But then potentially there are signs that maybe in the 10-day range another strong front works on through. And I do think we're in a pattern of a lot of troughing in the long run. So, we could really be starting fall here for sure, and not really having to worry about going back to summer for any prolonged periods of time. As for radar, obviously hurricane in the south, we talked about that. Some precipitation in the northeast this week. We've got this big upper level low with all of this cold air that's going to have just enough lift. Some high level snow flurries not out of the question with that. Some lower level valley kind of rain, or at least just showery, kind of cloudy conditions for you folks into New England as that swings on through. Again, also don't rule out a little bit of lake effect precipitation this week, but other than that, I mean, this is getting into the weekend. Once the hurricane passes, it's pretty smooth sailing before potentially, you'll notice again, about 10 days from now, another storm system tries to work on through the northeast, another big time trough of cold air. We'll see what that does, but again, that's far enough out there that we don't really need to focus too much on it right now. All right, temperatures, again, I don't want to show you the temperature anomaly map because this is a pattern that's going to have big diurnal swings. So that means cold mornings, or at least cool mornings, and warm afternoons. So Wednesday afternoon high temperatures, you'll notice, I will mention, it's still going to be pretty hot out here into the plains, specifically through Texas, but you get east of the Mississippi, again, that fall weather in full swing, highs in the 60s and 70s, only into the 50s through portions of New England. Low temperatures down into the 40s and 30s through the Northeast and through portions of the Great Lakes, into the 40s and 50s through the Ohio and Tennessee River valleys, and then lows into the 50s down through the Deep South. Then you folks in Florida, unfortunately, again, not your week by any means, between a hurricane and just missing out on the fall air. Altogether, not great. But yeah, so that's what we got, folks. Again, really important, though, that you stay weather aware here in the state of Florida, and really anywhere, like always, but especially the state of Florida, as potentially major Hurricane Milton, again, really looking like a potential worst case scenario for portions of the West Coast there. So with that said, y'all have a wonderful and safe rest of your Sunday. Enjoy it out there, and I'll see you all next time.